Committee. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this edition, May 16th of Capital Program Committee. It is 3:10-ish. I'd like to get let me start by saying, pursuant to Mass Law and regulations, this meeting is a hybrid meeting. It is also being audio video recorded. Will be on the town's YouTube website. Please do not say or display anything you don't want to have shown. Any questions or comments through the chair, please, and for good order and minutes. And I think that I've covered most of the points that need to be covered for our informal meeting. Can I get any votes, if any, will be conducted via roll call. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
BJ on your motion?
Aye.
Barry?
Aye.
Howard?
Aye.
Christie?
Aye.
Okay, great. So we're here to discuss plum enhancements. Under plum enhancements, there's a couple topics I want to just bring up and kind of go through as opposed to just going through our list. Number one is, well, we'll ratify this at the next meeting. I wanted, before we get started, I want to see if everyone is at least comfortable with the current meeting time as opposed to earlier in the day. Is there anyone who objects to the three o'clock start? Okay. Update with respect to plum enhancements. I met with Brian, Finance Department, obviously, and the 23rd. We covered that basically the OpenGov reporting system solution that town administration and finance are looking at is essentially a multi-year process, including to create more comprehensive inclusion of capital planning within that report version. To include current year requests and recommendations of the finance department, administration, and Capcom, and to include likely following out year requests. Let's see. They're looking initially for Capcom's up-down recommendations earlier, so earlier in December. For incorporation into the presentation they'll make to the select board. Fair to say we've developed a framework and resulting product, the Capcom's report, that can be repurposed into a capital story report within OpenGov and as an aspect of the larger budget. Let's see. 10-year SIP, the philosophy there, which I agree with, and we can get into at a later date as a discussion matter. If anyone is inclined, just touch base with me to let me know, not get into deliberation, but let me know, is to go from a 10-year capital improvement plan to a 5-year. And as each year declines, add the new upcoming year. And the concept there is simply that 10 years out, we may list projects in advance, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to be trying to price projects past the 5-year mark. The OpenGov report is likely based on resources available at the finance department and the perhaps more so the complexity involved, not going to be something that would require advancing our final report earlier, but we are looking at that. And ongoing discussion. Brian had acknowledged SIP request forms being tightened up with completion, being completed at the beginning of the process with supplemental data. And Sue has obviously confirmed that and conveyed that she'll be the point on that. That's the update. The unfortunate part of this, and I'm not sure if that's going to stick or not, is there is a truncated timeline for enhancements. In discussions on the 11th, We understood that the deadline for our submission of a list would be the end of the month. Due to the modifications town admin and finance would like to make, it was suggested to me that we move that up to May 17th, which is tomorrow. I don't see that as possible in any way, shape, or form, given the complexities of what it is we're dealing with. And I'm going to address that in a moment in a way I think that dovetails with our goals and town admin and finance goals. I want to acknowledge, I'm sorry, that's annoying. I wanted to acknowledge that there were some canceled meeting time was due. We had some canceled meetings due to conflicts with, I'm not going to name members, but every member is important. And in each instance, there was at least 2 members who couldn't attend. And more recently, I sustained a little bump to my head, which was a little bit more than a bump. But probably the person won't get into that. So that's another aspect of scheduling that I'm working to overcome with respect to rolling out, identifying and sussing out enhancements to the extent we can put them in as a request or recommendations for updates into the software. So that brings us to an assessment. Based on where we are, having a pretty deep understanding of what will be required to successfully implement modifications, enhancements that we suggest, I'm going to suggest the triage concept that I brought up. That will be that we prioritize our list with a gross sense of which items are relatively easy to implement, which items are kind of on the fence, and the other side of the fence being items that will take structural modifications and or require that we have more meeting time than we really have to accomplish the task currently. More meeting time relative to even the end of May. I also want to note that in retrospect, the complexity of the changes, some of the changes we're looking at, even if we had had a dedicated work group working on this 2 days a week, I don't think we would have made an end of May date. So I think that's in the mix too. So what I want to find out from you on the triage concept, if anyone has a strong objection, if they have a strong objection, we'll pursue discussion on that. If they don't have a strong objection, we'll move on to the redirect. The redirect will be to go through the list and get a sense. I can give you an idea of whether this is something that would need to be into our phase 2 with respect to requiring much more in-depth discussion. I'd like you all to keep in mind before you determine whether you think this is a good idea or not, that as an example of the rationale for triaging, we're talking about certain enhancements that are going to need high-level discussion. And in relation, we spent probably the better part of 20 minutes simply trying to understand what cloning means. So I think that wasn't a reflection on anyone other than a reflection on the process that these enhancements, some of them are going to take significant discussion of higher level topics. And one of the things we need to do in advance of that is come to commonality on definition and glossary. Having said all that, is there anyone who disagrees with the concept of triage and moving forward on that basis? Please speak freely. Can't see PJ and Barry. No hands up. Okay, I appreciate.
Good name. Yeah. Follow your lead.
That's okay, Stephen. Up top, I think, just to get that, so you can see that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I appreciate your confidence in me in the process. We'll move forward. Let's just see here. Were there any other? No. This is, we're basically recycling the list. This would be a good opportunity if you did not hear a particular topic that I may have missed from my notes, transferring to my spreadsheet, to please let me know via an email, just what the topic is, no deliberation. Again, we need to be cognizant of open meeting law violations or the perception of such. I'm just gonna kind of hit these with low hanging fruit. Request, or I'll tag these as we go. Having the requested amount static on the header of each page, that is, to me, something we will simplify and make our process easier. Those two can be mutually exclusive, so I'm gonna suggest that we move forward with that, and I'm also gonna suggest that as I go through this, it'll be kind of like town meeting. I'll mention it, I'll mention where I think it should go. If you prefer otherwise, please just call me out and then we'll have a discussion. Alphanumeric code, this goes to the naming convention. The naming convention will be a higher level discussion. However, the alphanumeric code is something in keeping with adding a column for a custom code that would simplify our work process, can easily be implemented now for our future use, perhaps even this budget season. So I'm gonna make my recommendation as we move forward on that. That will address repeat correct requests. That will address current request as the prior request brought forward. It will address current request that is a revised prior request. Essentially a prior request with substantive modifications. And of course, current new requests will have the current year, fiscal year alphanumeric, so those will stand out and of themselves. That naming convention will also address phased, recurring, supplemental, and to the extent we can pin down what we mean by scheduled versus, or in addition to scheduled within the context of the criteria, scheduled. Those are all higher level, and those would be part of our phase two. If I didn't mention phase two, I'm anticipating that we could start to take chunks of this off this summer, even before, on a prioritized basis, before we start with department heads. And we have dates during our regular schedule that are placeholders, and I would suggest that we utilize them in order to get these enhancements worked out so that they are resolved. Any that aren't resolved early can be resolved by the end of the calendar year, and subject to finance department support and plum can be resolved and put forth for early, very early for our next year budget cycle. All make sense? Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
So Rory user management tools, let's see, separate button, save draft, save completed. I don't know what that final animal will look like, but I would like to suggest that we move that forward now. It's relatively simple. It's a programming solution. It may look a little different than we envisioned, but as long as we have the capability. Sorting status we addressed can be largely manipulated within the current search parameters. However, I think that is one topic that we could discuss earlier and see if we can get resolved. So if there's some software changes, those software changes would be based on certain constraints, relatively simple. Status. Rory power user tool. So the idea was status. This is for backend management, for Sue to some extent, and certainly for myself in knowing when I need to knock on particular doors and say, hey, get your Rory's completed. So that's one that is programming. I'm going to suggest we move forward with. Funding model segmentation. So basically this is higher level. It is something that I think is an important discussion. I'm not suggesting we put off discussion necessarily on all of these until phase two. We're just prioritizing them. We may even get to this topic before the end of the month. It's just not likely that we're going to get to it to the extent that we can get it incorporated in the database change that's initiated in the beginning of June. I will be speaking with Brian to see if we can tier phase two or maybe even 3 phases, so that if we get through a portion of phase two, say in the end of July, that could be a separate project that could be that could be incorporated by the database developer. So there's some different ways to address solutions, and now that I had a little chance to think about it, I wanted to mention that. So funding model, whether it is a incremental or a phased funding model, would be phase 2. Rory, annual how-to, I think that's something that would be tail end of phase 1 and phase 2. Something we will pick up though, however, before we start inputting Rory's, is we'll implement, however imperfectly, a how-to. I think, and if anyone has a suggestion as to how to do that other than what I'm going to suggest now, please mention it. That would be a meeting that we'll have in July before our initial department head presentation, whichever one is first, and that'll give everybody an opportunity to, 1, get refreshed, 2, share how they do it, and 3, get insights in how they do it, how they review and bring relevant Rory's up and sort them. And 3, it will give everyone an opportunity to not only have shared that, but maybe gain insights from other members. So that is that's a late 1 or early 2. Membership changes, I just want to touch base on membership changes. We have, as you all know, at-large members, Christine, myself, and PJ. I wanted to just share with you guys, we've been here since 2017. I was looking at some old tapes. And it was interesting to see. But the effect of having membership changes is if the membership doesn't stay consistent, it becomes a software, a matter of software programming late in our onset cycle, and more so now that we're moving department heads up. So that's something that I want to work out with. I think we need to address as a phase 1 matter. It will really be something that finance and Plum have to work out. But for an example, Jill decides to move on to something else. I don't want her to, not suggesting anything, but using Jill as an example. She isn't here, easy to name some reason here. If I believe the reappointment happens after the select board appoints new incoming members to committees. So it might be, it's traditionally, historically, it's been late enough that it creates problems with the software, and wrinkles take a while to work out. So that one, I think we want to get up front. Definitions, I think we want to get up front. This will be a tail end of phase 1 because we don't need the software developers to address it. Evaluating and rounding policy is definitely a phase 1. Guys, please, let's dispense with raising hand if there's anything, just so I'm focused on the list. Children. So Rory, this is going to get involved in scoring. So I'm gonna dispense with that one for the moment. Criterion, grouping, reorganization, including for better delineation, example being high, medium, and low versus required, recommended, elective. What I'm going to suggest on that is we 2-part it. And what I mean by that is we have 2 different issues. One relates to scoring, and one relates to how we identify the definition. High, medium, and low doesn't say much. Because it can encompass a very broad set of characteristics. And we need to determine in the SIP request form whether one that is a function of the department head's input or a function of town administration input. Simple to do, no big deal, just identifying. More importantly, I think we need to break out whether something is whether high, medium, and low actually serve a function, or are they best replaced by required, recommended, elective with respect to existing services and new services. So I'd like to address that in phase 1, and to the extent any of that bleeds over into sorting in the Rory, we'll pick that up in phase two, hopefully phase one. That's kind of a dense topic. Is there any questions on that? I know we've discussed it before. You guys are pretty versed in this stuff. Okay. Yep. New categories, these are phase two, funding sources anticipated, not obviously, finalized. The idea that we will put into the scoring, valuations, funding sources. So for instance, a capital exclusion versus 2.5 override. One of them may have a higher score than others. It will be based, like any of the other criterion, on the individual members' experiences, and then it will flow into the team ranking. Specific strategic plans, I'd like to make that a phase 1.5, 2. The idea is that will come up when we discuss definitions and the existing criteria, and I think it will benefit us to kind of extrapolate out a little bit. Scoring. This one I'd like to get into, if we can, as a phase one, because there has been minority sentiment, but it seems to be pretty strong. And I don't actually have a full understanding of what the concern is. So at the very least, I want to have us, I'm recommending we pursue diligence in understanding what it is the concerns are for scoring. And to the extent we can make changes in the first phase, I think we should do it.
I don't think that you could do that exclusive of the definitions and looking at the categories, which you put in number 2.
Definitions are number 1.
The further back, you put something in 2 that was like ops high, medium, low.
Definitions are actually a 1.5.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking,
You can't do the math until you understand whether the items are mutually exclusive or relative.
right, so I think that the byproduct of that point, which is a valid point, is that if we don't have time to actually do the scoring, I think that there are other elements that may make our process easier, simpler and easier. And again, I'm open for discussion on this. We have time for it today. Then reevaluating the scoring mechanism, the definitions, and potentially the sorting of criterion and the grouping. That is going to be a heavy lift involving not only software development on the back end for the database, but a redevelopment of our valuation model, all prior to our. Sue, would you remind me, when do we have our first department head? Under the advanced,
Hold 1 second, I can.
or roughly, it's early July, right?
I don't even remember.
I'm
No,
sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, the first department head is scheduled for August 8th.
I thought we moved it up.
We did, but usually the first few meetings of the committee are doing the Rorys and, going through that.
Okay, so that's good information. So Howard, what I would suggest to you is that the definitions and the scoring and the sorting would be our second lift, and hopefully something we can get finance department and Plum to agree to implement before the first department.
I wonder, did Sue and Brian tell you that this was our only bite at the apple, the submission, the end of this week or next week? Because I think that knowing how things work, they, once they put a deadline in, they can't do all of everybody's stuff at one time that they need to get taken care of. So it's not going to be immediate that it's going to happen.
So the discussion to date, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but the discussion to date is that we have a deadline. The discussion that I proposed is we sit down and figure out what our next deadline is, so that we're phasing this
I
so
agree
that
with you.
implementation with Plum.
Right. You meet your
Can we
deadline and
hear-
then yes.
And in the meantime,
It's
finance can get a list, Plum can get a list from us, they can get an order of magnitude. And they can proceed with finance department changes initially and our easier lift ones initially. So we're in agreement, I think we're just saying a little bit different.
No, it was at the same time. Thank you.
I love when you do that. Any other thoughts on that? Are we kind of hitting the bases for you guys? I love when we're symbolical. Okay, comment fields individual, I would like to work that out as a first level, discussion. I think it's relatively low. It's low level discussion, the higher, potential, is implementing it. And at the very least, I'd like Plum to be aware early about that. And then if it can be developed in, we want to pursue that. Requests. Covered. One of the elements that has come up in discussion by a few different members over the last couple of years is that, and repeatedly, is a criterion revolving around criteria, one of which is in-house versus contracted. So with respect to perhaps bringing certain types of projects in-house. So that would be moved up to sorting, scoring, and definitions. Then that would be a phase 2. Rolling stock, a report on that, and that relates to definitions, but I see that as an easy phase 2 because implementation within software is relatively easy, but it's not something that's required upfront, something that we could put into the second lift.
It's not even gonna hit Rory at all.
Yeah,
It's just a submission clarification. by
yeah,
the
it'll be
department.
a checkbox.
Yeah.
What I'm referring to is on the tail end, the report can be developed for us to be looking at online,
Yeah.
relatively easy and even not.
You mean when Peter pulls the data in?
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Incentivizing forward-looking data. Policies and procedures resulting in scheduled replacement within the capital improvement program, 5-year plan. Let me just make a note for my own clarification. I think that's a kind of a philosophical discussion on our part in a sense, and something that we would be making a recommendation to finance on. I don't think, given the timeline, department heads, Sue has provided the parameters, including timeline. And if I didn't mention, that Sue had volunteered previously and reinforced, she will be tightly monitoring this aspect. Timely submission, complete submission, including supplemental data. And what I understand, not to be punitive, but so that the process works going forward. If that complete data isn't submitted, the request won't be forwarded to through the system. So that kind of addresses incentivizing forward-looking data in a sense, with respect to current year, and I would suggest that incentives for out years would be second year. I'm sorry, second phase. Because it's not something software Plum needs to be working with. Let's see, rolling stock, departmental level summary page, which would include the alphanumeric title, request, amount, date. Again, I think phase 2, maybe even phase 3, because this is something we're going to want to see as a in a report form. And it's going to be more structural than a simple SIP request form. This will involve, if town calls our recommendation, probably a modification to how department heads, or at least some department heads, record and report data. And that's a kind of a cultural shift. And I just think it's it's a relatively simple thing, but it's not easy. It's a simple thing in terms of the final product, but it's not easy to implement. Reports, these I think are going to be schedule 3. These would be for our towards the end of our process, the final product, which would be status of prior recommendations, status of annual town meeting approved, so dollar numbers appropriated, encumbered, expended, approved within line items by the enterprise or department, amounts available for reallocation and reappropriation. And I frankly don't think we're going to get time I would suggest that finance department's time is better utilized on the front end with their own software enhancements and the OpenGov platform. Reports would include a capital which relates to general fund accounts, enterprise accounts. Only stuff was covered. Couple other items, but all fall under 3. We covered SIP request forms. These are not being completed, and that creates complications. I think that one of the reasons that's a complication is that, as we saw in the Florida town meeting, we need to be perhaps advertising in some way that the capital report exists and for people to go out and take a look at it. And that may involve having the supplemental data like tear sheets for vehicles included, accessible. Perhaps if we can answer questions in advance, that will help us all through the town meeting process. So that, my point being is having completed SIP request forms with supplemental data takes on another level of importance given how our system of government works. That covers those. Are there any retrospective comments on them? Please don't be shy. I need to hear it now. General thoughts? Sorry, I'm taking up the wind here. Believe me, I'm quickly running out of steam. So we're gonna go back up to the top and let's finalize some of these. Requested, let's see, enhancement, general items. Requested amount. I just want to make sure I have this clear. We're looking for the requested amount to be a static information on the header of each page. Correct?
That'd be ideal.
Okay, and also reflected in the printable version at the top, right? So that, like myself, I don't click through the tabs, I click to printable version of the SIP request form and all the data is there and I can look at it all at once. And SIP. Wait, it's almost like I forgot how to type. SIP. Okay. Alphanumeric code, same thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, if possible, probably not as much of something you're looking for throughout as the total request, but if it's easy, would be helpful.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah, it'll be the same. They'll just be, data from a record will feed a spot on a response.
Right. Yeah. So why not? I mean, kind of the more static information, the better in that regard.
Okay. All right. Well, at this moment, are there any other ones that you would think that we want to have? I would steer away at this point of whether it's phased, recurring, so on and so forth, because that
Yeah.
makes the solution that comes up in the alphanumeric coding, or it may be that it's on the head of the page.
Mhm.
But for now, that one's a little more involved because it's gonna take more discussion. So for right now, I'm gonna skip that one. Any others?
A question.
Yeah.
So are we saying, the request amount will be in the header of the, each Rory page?
Yeah, and actually, yeah,
Or on the list of Rory's, have it also include,
that's a good point.
That is a great point.
Actually, Peter, I don't know, are you in a position where you are to pull up, I would ask Sue, but I know she's gonna have to leave early. Are you in a position you could pull up your, Rory, and we could look at these as we go? I guess
I
I could do it on
should
this,
be.
but I'm sharing the screen, so passwords and stuff would be visible.
Yeah, the question is, I don't think I can share my screen
Oh, you're right.
as just a member and not the, whatever you wanna
Admin?
call it, admin, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, no, well, what am I talking about? I have it right there. I can do it.
Yeah, we can-
Yeah, I just need to sign in through a
Okay, yeah, no
master
rush.
password quick.
No rush, take your time. So, Christie brings up a good point that we would add this to the, as a column in the
which would be
Rory
my
summary,
open Rory page.
on the open Rory page.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
And it would be a column for each of those. Well, the alphanumeric code is there, the
Yeah.
new custom code, we would create a placeholder for, and the request amount would be there. Sue, I mean, I didn't say it, it should go without saying, but if you see anything fundamentally that you have a concern or you wanna add to, please jump right in.
Oh, yeah, Brian and I have been putting together our own list of things on our end, so.
Okay, yeah, but if there's anything you see on ours, I welcome your input.
So it's up right there.
So do you have my screen up there now?
We do.
Yeah, so
Got
basically what would happen is there would be two more columns. One would be a custom alphanumeric code. In the hopefully not too distant future, that would be include such things as a current year numerical, a alpha on whether it's phased, supplemental, so on and so forth. But we could have them, you know, while they're coding these things, it's easier to do it all at once. And I'll walk through this again. The other one would be more simply, and immediately active is the request amount. So that'll be on this page where people regularly interact.
I think that would be great. I mean, it's such a, I mean, it's just, I mean, we're always on this page all the time, and I think we'll just be keyed into request amounts much more than we would if we were to, you know, find cost and funding and look it up, and sometimes that's not filled in. I think this is a nice improvement.
Okay. The homework, please, I need you guys to help me here, is take a look at this, the printable SIP request form version. And with the concept of what we're trying to do here being to put those pieces of information that are most frequently sought without going overboard, take a look at the SIP request form and see if there are any others you would want to add to this page. Because again, the programming is relatively simple and it's more convenient for the database developer to be doing it at the same time because they're already, you know, it's point and click repetitive. So please take a look at the SIP request form and the printable version. It has everything and all the different elements of the request, and it'll be easier for you guys to get it. Okay, any others for this sheet at this time? Okay. We might be going into phase 2 quickly. I'm psyched about that. Oh, this is one we missed. Repeat requests. Capture on the SIP request form, perhaps through a checkbox field, and a field for text, whether this is a repeat request. And then the text would be, if it is a repeat request, just a little snippet on if anything has changed, or it wasn't approved because it was a low priority the prior year, or medium priority, or some information that would indicate why it's returning. The last bit on that is, I think that in the field, I know in the field there is an opportunity for, like, in gray text to say, you know, give an example of what we're looking for. So department heads, and it's kind of a reminder for Sue what it is we're looking for in that field. Does anyone have any concerns or comments on that? I think this came up with Brooke, is that it was a repeat and she wanted to know why. Chris?
So, and that might be part of maybe this committee's job, is that maybe when we don't make a request, maybe we can't make comments in the comment page on why it was either not recommended by us. This way, when we look at repeat requests, if we look at the comment page, we would be able to see what our previous deliberations sort of resulted in. Something like that.
It makes great sense. Can I ask you to bring that up when we get down to comments,
Yeah,
because.
oh, yeah.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
because it'll flow into the
Yeah.
discussion, because we were
Sure.
originally talking about individual comments.
Sure.
But that, now what you're introducing is a concept, which I think is a very valid one, of capital program committee comments.
Yes,
So that's
Yeah.
as a committee consensus.
Can I say something?
Please,
So real quick, because I do have to run, so I am gonna leave the Zoom going since I started recording, just so you don't lose the connection. But in regards to, repeat requests, I did add that to the form. I have them filling out for me with their capital request, because I heard what you guys had said regarding that a few weeks ago. So I've added it as to a field that they have to, on the form they provide to me, that they have to explain if it's a previous request and what year they requested it and why, was it voted down at town meeting? Was it pushed out, So I have added that with the intent that that will also be added into the software.
okay,
can I
thank
ask a
you.
question to
Chrissy, please.
for you? So is there any way to alter the original code to reflect maybe like an R in parentheses if it comes back, even if the content of the request has not changed at all?
I think that's something we definitely have to discuss with the developers, along with, getting better coding to address all of the, concerns you've all raised regarding that.
Christy, on that topic, I want to make a suggestion. I think, they don't come up often, but when they do, they are a little vexing, and we all kind of wonder, and we want to stay on top of it. And when I say we wonder and want to stay on top of it, what we wonder is the data that is on both Sue and our list, which is being created, a field for it. But I think if we add it to our My Open Glories, and we add it to the static information, and there'll simply be a column heading that says repeat request and a question mark, and then in the fields below for the respective requests, it will say yes. And if it doesn't have a yes, no big deal, but by virtue of seeing it there, we'll know to dig deeper. And that's a simple solution for the developer.
Yeah.
And in keeping with programming, they're very likely already gonna be doing. And at the same time, it gives us a heads up on our initial displays. Any concerns with that? Okay. Oh, I want to thank you guys. I feel like we're actually making some headway on this. It's been really difficult for me to get my head wrapped around it. The last couple of weeks, I've been trying. Naming convention, we're gonna jump, because that's at number 2. We're gonna go right to the, and iterative requests. We're gonna jump, that's all number 2. I just want to make sure I'm. Okay. Rory user management tools, status draft complete. Is, Sue, I just want to spotlight that one for you, if you're still here. You're still left, okay. So that, I think, again, we discussed, the concept is we want to be able to save a draft and then submit a completion, or have a similar utility. That's going to be something I just forward to them, unless somebody has a question on or a comment on the feature what we would like to accomplish with the feature, if it's different than what I interpreted it as. No. Sorting status. I think that maybe what we should do is for sorting status, as opposed to getting into an in-depth discussion about functionality that other members may understand we already have, but not all members understand we have, is that either today, if we have time, which we won't, is at the next meeting, we'll lead in with a quick, this is how I do it. It will be a pre Rory reminder that we're going to do later in the season. but I think that will help identify, and quantify to what extent we actually need to make changes, and then also what those changes would be. So I'm gonna ask that we hold on that. That's status incorporated. The Rory Power User Tools will be, something I mentioned earlier, which is back end for Sue and I to understand who has submitted what requests, both draft and completed. Need a report. Currently what we do is we load a spreadsheet, utility, and you have to go through every single request and, determine, from the team view, which is a lot of extraneous information. So we wanna, simplify that. Bear with me. Funding model, whether it's incremental or phased, that'll be a number 2. Lest there be any doubt, I want to just mention now that when we get to the phase 2 stuff, we're going to do a quick prioritization. At that point, we'll have a rough draft of this spreadsheet that you all can look at. So you're not sitting here, and somewhat, kind of an obtuse, it'll be a concrete list in front of you in advance. The annual how-to we addressed, that's a number 2. Membership changes, that's something I'll resolve with Sue and Brian. Definitions, I asked that we hold on definitions until the next meeting, because that is a number 1.5.
May I suggest that
Please.
the amount of time that we need to spend to look at the My Rory page
Oh,
is
yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
It's huge
Yeah.
because of what the names are, what the categories are, how they're interrelated, whether they're exclusive or interdependent on one another, you know, relative.
Mhm.
And how the scoring does that on an exclusive basis or relative basis.
I totally agree.
Just saying.
I totally agree. I appreciate you putting it out there because it's an important element of our common understanding of what's involved. Evaluating, let's hit this one, the rounding policy. Look, I understand there aren't members here and we can always revisit these things. These things being the topics we've seemingly put to bed today. But it'll be on the initiative of the individual member. So the rounding policy, I believe where we landed on it was a informal agreement that we would round to the 10s. I'd like to just entertain discussion on formalizing that, and we'd like to speak.
I think this, Barry, wasn't this your point?
Oh, we caught him on a quick break. Why don't we come back to this one when he's back from,
Was it you or was it Barry that brought
I
it?
think it was Barry.
I'm sorry, which one are we on?
The rounding, you know, should we do it in 20s or 10s or
That was
5?
me.
Was you? I thought it was Barry.
Yeah, that was me. I just thought that, no, I just thought, it was nice to have flexibility from the start as we were learning about this. Because there's always like, you know, fine tuning it, you start to get down to the nitty gritty of of scoring. But, for the sake of continuity. And regardless of how finite and how, you know, close that is, I just thought it was good that we were all on the same page, because my 25%, you know, how does that rate with Peter's 35%? It just is, I just thought alignment was good, especially when all of these are sort of getting grouped together for a common number,
I think. if
for a
you-
Rory score.
I think if you look at the arithmetic, but I'm not sure that the math takes care of that. Because it's all weighted. So it doesn't really matter, but I
Yeah,
do
I just-
think
I'm-
that, I do respect your idea. I mean, why should we be putting 1 or 2 or 7 there? Maybe we should be doing
Yeah.
20s and 10s.
Well, and to that point, if we did a whole 100-point scale, that doesn't preclude any individual from still abbreviating it to whatever they feel is comfortable, or they're comfortable and confident filling it out with, that suits them.
True, I'm accounting for, unintended arithmetic. That might be in the program
It
that we're
could
not
be,
thinking
there,
about.
I don't know if it's there or not, but
Alright. Am I
you-
thinking
no, your
beyond
po-
it?
No, your point is well taken,
You know,
but someone should tell us that it's not a
Yeah.
problem, not us. Tell me.
So,
anyway,
yeah, so I think where we are at this point in the evolution of this, concept is, do we want to formalize a policy on a set percentage? Is it 5? Is it 10 as the minimum? Or do we want to just have an informal understanding that it be 10 or whatever it is? It's up to you guys. It's been voiced a couple of times. I wanted to put it
yeah,
out there.
and what's accurate for what we're scoring? I mean, what do we need to really, how finite do you need to make those scores? You know?
I think my suggestion
Yeah.
is that when we get to austerity budget times, we're gonna need to get granular, but in the meantime, we're not sifting through these on a 1-point basis.
They're all relative anyway, so.
Exactly.
But I think
Yeah,
your
yeah,
point
yeah,
is,
yeah.
what would you recommend? If you had to pick 5 or 10 or 20 as the increments that we rate in?
Peter, I think
Just
you can
make the
stop sharing if you
recommendation.
want.
What's that, Steven?
I think you can stop sharing if you want.
Great, thank you. Let me know if you need any more.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, I mean, my opinion would be, either quarters or fifths. But I don't think,
You mean 20s or 25s?
yeah. I mean, I think quarters, are pretty good.
I do quarters. I'll just, it's kind of like a soft, medium, hard, extra hard. It's
Yeah.
not very important, kind of important, very important, needed 100%.
Yeah, and then the scores in between, you're really like, kind of,
Well, it'll come out in the weighting.
yeah. I
But
know,
that's fine, so
know.
I
But,
think
but when,
let's try.
when we're discussing it, there's variation, there's sort of like, well, what is, I say 25, you say 35, but are you saying we're on the same page? Or are we, do you know what I mean?
I
It's just
do,
for-
but
for-
I think that some of this will go away when we reinvent the Rory categories and definitions.
This way,
But I like your idea, so let's just
well, this
go
way,
with it.
if I see your scores, if we're,
Yeah.
wherever we're pulling up an example, I know where you're at.
Right.
I'm not guessing like, well, is he for it?
No, I'm saying let's try it and then let's revisit this at the end and make sure that the
No, no, no.
decision was sensible.
Can I throw a thought wrench into this?
Yeah.
No.
The potential issue, well, the issue I see here, and I kind of considered it before now, is on the tail end, when we do the preliminary up and down to determine what it is. So the standard of deviation in some instances will increase widely on certain requests and decrease widely on others. And what I mean by that is,
Mhm.
if you were going to score something 10, but you made it a 25, that's gonna increase, it's gonna decrease, well, it's gonna make it, let's keep
It's
it
gonna
simple.
increase the standard deviation, it's gonna decrease the effectiveness of that number.
Exactly, so I'm inclined, and I hate to say this, but and as a practical matter, I don't think it makes a difference at this point in the maturation of our process, that we go with a 5 hundredths, so number 5, 5 basis point increments. Because that creates the lead, it makes it practical, you're not putting in 3 or 1 or 4. But at the same time, it doesn't disvalidate the average mean and standard deviation model that we utilize.
Just to correct, you don't mean 5 basis points, you mean 5 nominally.
Thank you,
Just check it.
Explain
and
that.
I appreciate
What
it.
is that? So you're saying?
Yeah, so he's saying instead of using 25, use 5. That's what he just said.
So so what it does is it puts you in a position
That was
where,
the English to English.
as a matter of policy, what was that point you just called out?
Well, that was not English.
No, yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying.
I was just, because you're a detail man, as you say.
No, I appreciate, if I can be educated
Yeah.
more than 16 times in a meeting, I'm happy.
So, Peter didn't respond to that, to your comment, which
Yeah,
was a
please,
good
this is
comment.
an open discussion, guys.
Sorry, yep, I had to grab something to start. So was it that we do 5% for percentage point increments, so we said?
Do you hear his explanation as to why he was thinking that? Was
I did not, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I can abbreviate it in summary. It doesn't mess with our average, median, and standard deviation modeling. Whereas a wider point spread of utilizing 25 as an increment, for instance, if you were gonna be a 10.
Got it.
You put in a 25 versus a 0.
Yep,
that will
so,
skew the result.
right, and so to that point, it gives everybody the ability to break it down to the nearest 5 that they can come up with. To the same extent, if somebody is typically either at a 0, 25, 50, or 75,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, that may or may not have been happening for the last 8
I
years.
think if you
Yeah,
use.
and let me clarify, my comment was not on the increments, my comment was that we all were doing the same thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I
You know,
was just.
yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I thought,
Yes.
because I was asking you specifically
Yeah,
what
yeah.
you were recommending that the increments were.
No.
But I
no.
think if you go, I think I take his point.
Yeah.
Which is not unusual, but that 25 increments of 25 would dumb it down too much.
Yeah, it'd be simple, but it makes it in some ways more difficult. Okay, so it sounds like we're good with a 5. And what did you call that type of a point?
Nominal. A rating, 5 nominal.
Yeah, that makes
Five
sense.
basis points is 0.05.
So.
I would say 5 percentage points.
Well, I meant a base.
Nominal
point of
5
100.
percentage points.
I
is
meant a base.
Nominal 5
So
percentage.
everything in increments of 5.
Mhm.
Sounds good.
Okay, sounds good.
Done.
5. Okay, so we'll inform the membership. And it, it's something that is easily modifiable. Children is a number 2 because it involves. Oh, no, let's talk about, we're gonna talk about that in scoring. So I'm gonna see scoring. Grouping reorganization is a 1.5, 2. New categories is a number 2. Specific strategic plans is a cross up with definitions. Actually, I'm gonna put in funding sources as. Because that's gonna come up in definitions, we want to address that. It's been a 1.5. Scoring will be a late and the ones. Comment field. Oh, let's get to comment field. So my perception of this topic is we've been talking primarily about adding a field for individual members. It's gonna be a software thing. They can figure it out. I don't know. I just want to say up front, it will be a difficult solution to make your notes discreetly viewed. I don't want to use the word private, but it will be very difficult to tie those notes to an email address and login. So basically what it would be is some type of a set of fields that either we would each type into and designate with our initials, a common field for individual member comments, aggregated, or they may be able to come up with a solution that they would be separate fields. But I just want to clarify up front, having them show up based on your login information it's a difficult hurdle because that's not what the software is set up for.
So when I was thinking about this, my plan for next year was to keep a separate spreadsheet of notes for each one so that I didn't have my notes in Rory. Because then I could transfer our conclusions as a group into Rory. Rather than having individual comments there.
Yeah, I
And
agree with that.
Well, I want to get to that topic too, because that I think is as important. I think the individual one is going to be dispensed with by virtue of how the software can provide.
yeah,
The other one though, and this is a good distinguishing between comments and conclusion. I think what we had set up was in the last version enhancement was a comment field for Capcom. And I think if you wanted to, you could utilize that, and then we can have a report that would by a touch of a button, export any information you want, including the comment, in an Excel file. Up to you, think about it. But I do want to add, and I want to get your feedback, guys, on it, adding a conclusions field.
I think that's more important than the comments.
Yeah.
I think that we don't have a place where we could go back and visit why we determined what we determined of rejecting it or approving it or, ignoring it or thinking it was a stupid idea. Or what was missing from the presentation of the department manager.
I think that's an excellent idea. I think it's really important and it will help us, especially if we get a repeat. We're getting the department head's narrative on an explanation, but it gives us an opportunity to have our own information readily available. And then the question would be, that would be resident within the printable SIP request form view, and where else? We would want that, I think, on the same page that the department heads selecting repeat and providing the supplemental information would be, so it'd be on the introductory page. Does that make sense to you guys?
Does that work on in the sequencing things? Do they set those pages up before and it's hard to go backwards and reinsert the conclusions into those pages?
No, it'll be, so any page will be, once it's entered, any data field will be entered into the report or the form when you bring it up. So let me say it a different way. The information populates on use and
Fine, that's
unless
the
it's
answer.
rewritten.
Yeah.
So
it'll show up,
no temporal.
it'll show up right where we would need it then.
Yeah. I think so on the, and on the introductory page.
So you'll see the amount, you'll see what the department had said about it, and you'll see what we said about it.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be really useful. So long as we're diligent, and I know Howard will be, on inputting the conclusion. The other thing is, Howard, it'll accelerate the transition to bringing capital program report into Open Energov, because there won't be a separate spreadsheet that if you take up the task or whomever does, we have to cross-reference and then input. It'll already be in the database, point and click, it will populate the respective field in the final report and in the Open Energov report. So I think that's a great one. Let me just see, where did we have, if we want to have repeat requests. So we want this. We want this on Open Rory's. And introduction page. Okay. Let me see, we don't have that many more, actually. Do we want to just keep going for a few more minutes here? We want to verse that?
I do have to get going momentarily.
Okay, so where we are, let's see. Fields, we've resolved that we want individual, we have a Capcom and we want a conclusion. That's really it for phase one, and that was simpler than I hoped. That's a wonderful surprise. So next up, we'll be getting into definitions and scoring. And I think maybe it would behoove us, given where we are, that we would maybe focus on definitions. Please, if you have a concern about scoring, please articulate the point through it. Howard, I know this is a concern of yours, and Barry. Do you guys feel that it's something you can get your hands around in an email? I just need to be prepared, but we can't share the information in advance, but because it could be a form of deliberation. But if you felt that you could kind of document your overview thoughts on the issue of scoring, it will help me get a handle on how to facilitate discussion at the next meeting and facilitate in an efficient manner. And then we can move forward, I would suggest, on scoring and the related definitions. Because if we can get through those, we could probably get this into the first lift.
I don't think I could do that, and I'll tell you why.
Okay, that's fine.
The reason is I don't think you can answer the second question until you have the definitions established.
Yeah.
So you understand how they are, whether they're relative or exclusive.
Gotcha. No, that's a valid point. I was coming at it from being.
I'd like to
steeped
do what you do, but it would be,
in- Yeah, no, it makes sense. Christie,
What was the, can I ask what the comment was about scoring?
there's concerns about scoring and I'm not positive what they are. I'm trying to
Yeah,
get
okay.
a handle on.
Yeah,
those.
got it.
what happens is that you have to, like, the three items might not be in category one, might not be mutually exclusive. And so one might be medium, one might be high, medium, and low. Why would you want to put a number in medium if you think it's low? Why would you have to put a number in high if you think it's low? Because you would put your whole number in the last one. And
Yeah.
it should handle that appropriately.
I would say, looking at that, well, I can discuss it.
Can I just answer that
Yeah,
question?
yeah.
That if you think so, and there may be some confusion here, I want to make sure I understand. If you believe a score for a particular request is a low, the way that it convention that we've determined is, and maybe this wasn't communicated, is that you score the low and the medium and the high are 0. However, if you think something is a high, you score the medium and low 100.
No, that would be,
But that's your concern.
that's exactly.
Okay,
The
perfect.
other thing is I remember a pop-up message that you have to have it add up to 100 in the programming, or you can't move on.
I don't know about that one.
I can't
That's-
remember.
Does that go to the first one where you think if it's a low, that the
Like,
medium and the high?
like
should
it
be-
may not be an important issue, but on the scale of the three items, it might be that's where you want to put your
Okay.
weight. So when I went backwards, which you're gonna hate to hear this, is when the result wasn't what I wanted it to be, I played with the numbers and put the numbers where they needed to be.
Howard the hacker here.
So I'm just saying that
We'll figure it out. Okay, no, that's really helpful information that solves for people trying to email things. Barry, are you with us?
No, he's off somewhere.
Okay.
I was gonna, can I just make a
so-
comment?
Please, please.
Before I forget, yeah, I was just looking at this, and Stephen, I know you had, part hand in some of this, but, or all of it. So you may be able to explain, but preserve necessary function, which is ops high. And ops medium is, prevent degradation,
right.
so close.
They're separate issues, frankly.
Yeah.
You know, and they're not one is, maybe it does prevent degradation, and maybe it also does do the other thing. Maybe they're both just as important as one
Yeah,
another.
I mean, yeah, but
The concept there, and we're gonna really get
Yeah,
into
yeah,
the meat of this.
So your point, that's the point.
The concept there is that if it's higher, prevents degradation. Preserve necessary function is a subordinate.
But it's not. They're exclusive.
Well, and this is. why we're making the
Because one, you
definition.
could be preventative maintenance, like I believe in, you do large scale preventative maintenance before you have a problem. However, that preserves it, but it doesn't necessarily say that the item is malfunctioning now.
So. Yeah, and the part of the problem and the reason we need to extrapolate these criteria out is that you're thinking about the capital asset and someone else may be thinking about the service that's provided. Now, of course, you can't provide a service without the capital asset in some instances, but not in all instances. So it's gonna benefit us to go through these, and that's why I was saying, like, it took us 20 minutes to talk about cloning. This is gonna be a long.
I think that we need to have that conversation.
Yeah.
You need to explain that, well, I look at this
Yeah.
and I see it this way, and then we can respond to that and say, I think I agree with you. It looks weird.
No, totally.
okay,
So are you guys comfortable with, we'll close the meeting out with some direction to the chair. I'd like, what I'm gonna suggest is I'm gonna go through the phase 1.5. We completed a whole phase today, so pat yourselves on the back. But phase 1.5 and 2, the ones that bleed into 2, based on our kind of ranking here earlier today. And I'm gonna try and prioritize those by low hanging fruit relative to the other ones. So like scoring and definitions is gonna be a process. And if there's 2 or 3 other things that we could maybe pick off quickly, I'm gonna try and advance those.
yeah.
And, if you guys are good with that, that's
Yeah.
the.
And I think you also now have the ability to answer the submission that you're being requested with the number 1 items.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So it's gonna benefit finance department. This is, the triage approach, I think, was beneficial.
Brilliant.
Okay. Hey, look, I appreciate you guys sticking through my monologue at the beginning of the meeting. And we will be meeting next Thursday at 3 p.m. I hope to have a full complement because we're gonna be dealing with some really wonderful, interesting topics. That's important to get feedback on, and I understood there were some scheduled conflicts this week. With all that said, any thoughts for next week's meeting that you guys want me to be aware of? Okay, how about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, Christie, on your motion?
Aye.
Howard,
Second, all right.
Peter?
Aye.
Barry?
Aye.
Hey, awesome, thanks again, guys. Hey, does
Thank
it?
you.
How to shut down the record on this?
Well, the icon there, can you click on that where it says recording and see if that works?
Where do you see it?
On the top left in the,
It says,
Oh, it's not on this screen.
oh,
I see.
then you need to,
right there, right there.